Well, we're in my flat in Bakewell. There's surprisingly for 29th of November, there's a blue sky, lovely sunny day out there. The lovely hillsides, clear, silhouetted against the blue sky. Everyone's smiling today for a change, after a cold, wet most of the month. As a farmer, Christmas always meant another 100 hungry days until the spring. When you thought of the animals and the stock of hay getting less and less day by day, and how you couldn't afford to run out of winter fodder before the grass grew in the spring. For me, Jesus has always been such a constant presence. I suppose, yes, of course, the growth of grass in the spring and the dying down in the autumn has always been, for me, the natural cycles have always been more significant to me than those of man. But as I got these little window boxes outside my window, and I've cut down the last year's flowers now. But look, just there's a tiny little sort of pale bud popping up through the earth now. That little spring bulb is already pushing its head up towards the light. There we are. That's Advent. And no sooner does winter settle in that the signs of spring appear, new life. So when I look at this world, people get upset about this world as it's all coming to an end and it's all terrible, but you see, there's always signs of hope, there's always rebirth. In the end is my beginning. It's all cycles, it's all happened before. It comes round and round. One life succeeds another. The cycle of birth and death. I've never related it so much to the church calendar, but it's as old as human experience goes, isn't it? Yes, the days soon start. What are we, November the 29th? You see, in another 3 weeks the days will start lengthening again, won't they? And it's extraordinary, isn't it? It takes a long time, doesn't it, for the new life to emerge. You get the first signs before December's finished, and yet we've got to wait till April, May before the spring really gets going. The first swallows appear. The cuckoo. We don't get many cuckoos now, but they used to come about middle of April, didn't they? One of the things I write about in Africa, I was thrilled once. I was in a part of Namibia, in a very far away from any other living soul. I remember there was a lot of elephant droppings there where I stopped, and I looked all around, not a sign of anything, just a few animals. And then, bless my soul, I heard a cuckoo. I thought, this is where our little friend comes to spend the winter. I wonder if the same cuckoo comes and sings near my farm at home. Marvellous, isn't it? And not only cuckoos, you see the swallows there, sitting on the wires just like they do here. Same swallows, I suppose. I know where they go now in the winter. You may know that I published a book on Russia. I called it Oh, Russia, which I like that title very much, but I felt it didn't really convey fully what I wanted to convey. And as I'm using a common theme, mystic, as the title for my books, there will in fact be another 9 books, I hope, all with the sort of title mystic something, mystic beginnings, mystic approaches, mystic apprentice, mystic expansion, mystic burning, mystic love, mystic union. And if you want another one, that's why I'm really changing the name of O Russia to Mystic Forbearance. I like the word forbearance, because one of the great problems that besets anybody who ventures onto the spiritual path is how on earth do you cope with the world? As you feel yourself being drawn out of the world, you'll find that the world clings to you. And you can't just get in the balloon and sail away, I'm afraid. We still have our bodies, we still have our human life to live. So forbearance is very, very, is a very relevant theme. How do we cope with it? It's particularly the less pleasant sides of life. And that's really why I've called this, why I've changed the title of O Russia to Mystic Forbearance in Russia. And personally, I think this is a very important and valuable book, and probably one of my, I won't call it the best, but I hope they're all good, but certainly one of my very valuable books, because Russia is a much misunderstood country in the West, but it's an intensely interesting country. It had the first really full-scale socialist revolution. So it knows better than anyone the consequences of socialism, for better and worse, for better, for worse. And really for the century, the Russian Revolution broke just over 100 years ago. So for over a century, the Russian society has been grappling with the consequences of it, which varied from, you could say, the wonderful to the absolutely terrible. Yes, my mother was in the middle of it, because she was born, strangely enough, she was at school. And she was looking out of the classroom window when the old Russian imperial flag, which was flying over the college where she was at school, was hauled down, was replaced by the red flag of communism. And she remembers the teacher saying to the children, look out of the window, children, watch what's happening. This is a moment of history. And my God, it was. Anyway, Mum, a few years later, her family displaced and in the process of being destroyed was sent out a little refugee to the West, where she eventually produced me. And I went back to Russia and lived there for several years, which was a very, very, very eye-opening experience for me. Not only to discover where my own personality came from, but to learn in depth about Russia. And in particular this great, great lesson of forbearance, which we in the West tend to. We're so sure that we can govern the world as we want. We have democracy, we have freedom, we have all sorts of scope to express ourselves, our individuality. But in Russia it was not so at all. The communist revolution became horrifically oppressive to the vast majority of the people in Russia. It's another world, really, from the West. And And yet Russia is a deeply spiritual country. It's probably the most spiritual country I've ever been in. They call it Holy Russia, Holy Mother Russia. And you may recall in the Gospels how when the angels announced to Mary that she was to be the mother of a child, Jesus, Mary gave the answer, "Behold the handmaid of the Lord, be it unto me according to thy word." And this has been taken very deeply into the Russian heart. So there's a certain submissiveness in the Russian character towards the horrors that authority often unleashes upon it. A sort of humility, a forbearance. And, you know, one of the keys to spiritual development is less me, more God. Not my will, but thine, O Lord. Be it unto me according to not my will, but your will. That is the way to holiness, certainly as demonstrated by Holy Mother Russia. Forbearance. Forbearance also means absence of criticism, of judgment of your neighbour. It means acceptance. It's really the forerunner of, well, in one word, spirituality. This book, I wrote it, this was one of my later, it was not 20 years ago, between 20 and 25 years ago. And when I was in Russian Christianity, also Russia has the Orthodox Church as compared to our Western churches, which again is rather different to the West. It has a different approach. It's a more contemplative, a more meditative approach to God, a less humanistic. The individual isn't counted for so much as it is in the West. In the West, it's all about human rights, isn't it, and my rights. What do you want to do with your life? What do you think of the politics or this, that, and the other? Every child is encouraged to think for themselves. In Russia, it's the opposite of that. The individual is not counted for much. At least he's given his natural due rights, but it's the community, you see, it's the country or the village or the school or it's the group that is more important than the individual. The family is more important than the individual. So there's an unselfishness about the country, a sharing, which of course was a natural, naturally was a willing, opened their arms to socialism when it came, because the two seemed to go together. Of course, until it all goes wrong. I think I made about 16 times I went to Russia in all. I lived there 5.5 years. Well, to begin with, I went as a mature student, but just because I spoke English, and they didn't have any Englishmen around at that time, but I got drawn into teaching English, which I'd never done before, but it wasn't very difficult. I just told the children about my farm and all the animals I've known, which amused them and kept me happy. We had some lovely times together. And then I became very interested in the Russian church, and I learned, it was almost like learning Christianity again from a different perspective. And I immediately found that my own practice of meditation naturally slotted in with Christianity. I discovered a contemplative side of Christianity that had I had not found in the West. And that, of course, I loved all that. So I greatly deepened my understanding of what the faith is all about and the significance of Jesus, and in fact the significance of almost everything that has got rather skated over now in our sort of politically correct and humanistic West. In the new edition, there's a new foreword. Actually, as always happens when one publishes a book, at least when I publish a book, you then find papers and things that you'd forgotten that should have been included. And so usually the man who prints my books has learned his lesson. He knows not to print too many to start with. So I've got a chance to look through it. Of course, the number of times I've been through this book, but with 600 pages, it's quite a job to go through. Not surprisingly, there are a few typos and a few odd mistakes in it, but hopefully they get less and less, and there are not too many left now. Anyway, there's another 19 pages in this new edition, and there's a foreword, and there's some other interesting things included. Now, I've got another pal who comes to meditate with me, who's a university professor, surprisingly, but he kindly wrote the foreword. So I hope, anyway, it'll be not only a historical and a social book, but I hope it will really help people grappling with this world, this problematic world, how they can, at least how one person, how my experience, how one deals with it really, how spirit may strengthen to bear an unbearable world. Yes, that's how you'll see that phrase on some adverts on the website, how spirit may strengthen to bear an unbearable world. Yes, I like that. It puts it in a nutshell. Not only in Russia, but in our own lives here in the West, which can be pretty unbearable at times. How can spirit strengthen to bear an unbearable world? But I still feel compelled to participate in the world of words, not only when people come to see me, but in producing these books, most of which I should point out were written quite a long time ago, at more active times of my life. And most of them have just sat in the cupboard for 30 odd years. I'm thinking, well, that was it really. Not that I wrote them as books in the first place, because they were really just extended letters to my mother and father, my wife at that time, when I was abroad. They weren't written with the intention of being a book, but they're actually ready-made books, particularly valuable, I think, because they're written from first-hand experience, from the unfolding events of the life I was living at that time. So it isn't a matter of me sitting down and thinking what I'm going to say, which would always be a warning sign to me. I don't trust my thoughts. But to write from the unfolding of everyday experience is a different matter altogether, when one's in the present moment and you're just noting down what's there. So I have produced two new books this year, and there's another 4 in the pipeline. One of those nearly done. I'm getting some help now. There's a woman that's helping. Well, 2 women actually who are doing some of the typing, but because these books were, of course, written by longhand, the pen and ink, and now they've got to be put on the computer. And I'm so slow doing that that these women, fortunately, are helping with it. This book was the first book I had published, a long time ago now. The first book I actually wrote was when I was 47, which is how many years ago? 35 odd years ago, when I went through a crisis time in my life, of course over a woman, of course, and which really turned my life upside down. And endeavouring to understand what had happened to me, I started writing. And that is the foundation of what I've eventually got around to publishing, this book, which I call Mystic Beginnings, in which I go back to the very beginnings of my life, talking a little about my childhood, my school days, my days in the army, when I went out to Australia to see what the world looked like before men messed it up. Coming back to be a student, going farming, injuring myself, injuring my back, having to spend a few years in business and breaking out to go off again to South America to make the world a better place. I didn't go in for forbearance in those days. I thought I was young and strong. I thought I could make the world a better place with the strength of my arm, with my axe and my plough. I was going to grow more food to feed the hungry. So I was going out to take a grant of virgin land in the Bolivian jungle and develop it. But that didn't quite work out. As things happen, I met a Peruvian girl whose father persuaded me to go to Peru instead. So I went out there. Anyway, I had a year in Peru, and that shows me up in the Andes, where I was going to reforest the Andes. Well, I had a go at that. And then a little voice said to me one day, to make whole, be whole. And I saw myself as an immature young man trying to teach life to people older and wiser than myself. So I came home and I learned to meditate. And I farmed again. And this farming really took me over then. I, of course, was one of the first organic farmers. I was married, and then at 47, another woman appeared, and it wasn't really what most of you were probably thinking as you listened to me speak, because this woman also meditated, and we'd been to a meeting, and after the meeting, we didn't know each other particularly well. We were sitting in the car together before going home, and we just paused like this, like we did in meditation, closed our eyes. And I saw our two souls rise from our bodies and merge as one. Can you imagine that? Well, that changed my life. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. But I saw, as it were, beyond the person, beyond the physical, mental personality, into what one could call the self, the true self, the divine self. And I realized that it was two souls, both of ourselves. It was both of our divine selves, where, as it were, lifted out of our separate bodies into one spiritual unity. Well, talk about forbearance. How, having taken that on board, do you come back into ordinary life? Well, it's not like that at all, is it? Where we're all very, very separate. So, that's really what I've been trying to do ever since. Anyway, in this world, of course, nothing developed from it. We were both married. But as I say, that turned my life upside down. And this book is really my first attempt to understand. It threw me for many years I wandered around in a terrible depression. But this is really what happened up to the age of 47. And then we go on to my other books, which sort of take the story onwards. Right up to the present day, it's still evolving. So there we are. But what I really want to tell you is that as like a gift from heaven, not so long ago, probably a year ago, somebody, I suppose he was a young man, called Jackson Miller, I don't know where he came from, in America or where, on our YouTube channel, on the video called The Cycle of Life, he put a comment, and I'll just read you this comment. John, please write for us an autobiography and your personal timeline of life events. What made you move from here to there? To do this or do that? Begin this and end that. Include all the lessons you see fit to impart. So many of us search for what you have found. I think it would be more meaningful to people than you can possibly imagine. Kind regards for your willingness to assist others in the search for stillness. Jackson Miller. Well, Jackson Miller, there you are, printed, the first paragraph of the introduction. And thank you very much, my dear, for giving me a boost. And that's exactly what this book is. So if only I knew your postal address, I'd send you a copy. But I hope you'll see this video and remember your posting on YouTube and smile and contact us. I'll send you a free copy. Well, the good woman who is typing for me is on page 200 and, well, should be a few more now, but last lot I received from her took us up to page 274 of what I'm calling Mystic Expansion in Africa. As part of my adventures after this great event, which broke my life in pieces, I went out to Africa, South Africa actually. An old girlfriend of mine had a farm out there, and she invited me out, but that didn't work out as planned, so I found myself I managed to hire a little broken down old car, and I just wandered off. Anyway, for a long time I just wandered through the desert areas of Africa. I had many experiences. They were mostly sort of the desert kind, but there were also some I also got involved in some of the social issues that were current in Africa at that time, and of course made many comments about it from my developing spiritual point of view, which again I hope will be a very interesting read. And there's another one in parable, because when I came back from Africa again, I was faced with this dilemma of not knowing what to do. And I then had another vision of love, not in a woman this time, but from a young man who was a sort of spiritual teacher. And I followed him out to America, USA, and there had another long series of adventures, which I'm calling mystic burning, because what this chap said to the people that followed him don't come too near to me unless you're prepared to be burnt. Well, of course, fool that I was, I went near. That's why I'm calling the book Mystic Burning. But it was a salutary burning. I don't regret it. Painful at the time. Terrible, actually. Absolutely terrible. I thought I was really going out of my mind at that time. Really seriously. To save my sanity, I took a job as a cook in a little broken down motel in the Mojave Desert. So I cooked pancakes and fried eggs for several months, which was a bit of a change for me, but an interesting experience. Anyway, so that's really what makes this another book, which I hope will be a good read, a jolly good read, as well as a spiritually enlightening read, called Mystic Burning. And then there's another 2 or 3 books sort of in the process. As a companion book to this Mystic Beginnings, from 1972 to 1989, when I was farming, I wrote quite a number of articles, letters, and there were various early interviews made of me. I was a bit of an oddity at that time. I was my second farm. The first one was here in Bakewell, mostly sheep and animals. But my second farm was on a place called the English Fens, rather like Holland, flat, very fertile country, where I grew vegetables. And I only had 3 acres, which, you know, farmers would just laugh at it. You wouldn't be able to turn the tractors around on it. But after the last war, there was between the 2 world wars, the first, there was a movement then of getting people back to the land, because the agricultural production had fallen so much then, and machinery hadn't come in like it is now. There was still a lot of work for people. And the slogan was 3 acres and a cow, which was considered enough for a man to live on. Well, I had 3 acres and a cow, just that. And I made my living from it for 20 odd years, of which I'm very proud, one of the great achievements of my life there. And I didn't have a tractor, and I didn't use any chemicals. I had 2 strong arms then. This was my machinery. I loved to work by hand, and I was one of the first people to sell organic vegetables in London. And so I wouldn't call myself, I'm a bit embarrassed by it, but when other kind people say that I was a bit of a pioneer, well, I smile. I think, well, maybe I was. Anyway, all these articles and various letters and things that I wrote at that time, I've now collected, and it is being they're being printed in this rather large. It's a sort of scrapbook, really, but of course I've got 4 scrapbooks in the corner there where all these things are stuck in. But they're being taken out now and reproduced in this book, which is a sort of an anthology, you could say, of my early writing up to the time of, I suppose, when I was about in my 50s, early 50s. And here's one of the photographs taken of my wife Shirley and myself. I think there was a TV program when this photograph was taken. Anyway, we look rather like 2 sort of socialist workers from the Soviet Union, don't we? but there we are, in a crop of leeks, and rather a sweet picture. I look at it. Was I really like that once? Yes, I was. So that is really a sort of companion volume to this Mystic Approaches, and I'd like to think that it'll have a wide circulation. I think we don't quite know what it'll cost. It may I don't know. It's quite a difficult printing job, so the printer tells me. I don't understand these things. Oh yes. Well, what we have done, this is Phil's really who's done this, but when was it? A long time ago, the BBC made a film of me. Well, they made 2 or 3 films actually, but the best and the longest one was this very, very sweet film, made in, when is it? 1975. John Butler and his wife Shirley made a living from 3 acres in the Lincolnshire Fens, working by hand out of love for the soil. They were genuine pioneers of what is now called organic farming, but to them it was simply natural. It stars John, aged 38, Shirley, and the essential pig. My darling pig. The mobile compost heap. And then there were a few more recent programs. There were 3 more other videos that were made of me. Look at me, I got a beard again. I was an old man then. They're rather sweet films. I look at it and, well, a tear comes to my eyes really for good times. And so I hope that'll give a lot of pleasure and maybe a bit of serious instruction to those that are interested. Anyway, this is available now. You can order it on the website. Not so much for the money, but because of the sharing of hearts, which is what it's all about. We haven't been idle, considering the number of not only videos that we've made and posted on YouTube, but a number of retreats we've had with new friends coming, and from Hong Kong, a lot from Europe, all over Europe, a few from England. One of the regular visitors here puts it beautifully. She says, when I ask her that question, what have you come for? She says, nothing. And she calls me Mr. Nothing. I like that very much. It actually hits the nail on the head. It's exactly right, isn't it? That this is what we were trying to talk about in our last video, the nothingness of God. So to have reached a point in my life where people describe me as Mr. Nothing means I'm moving in the right direction, doesn't it? we got, if we really count all the people with whom we're connected now, what I might venture to call the spiritual family grows beyond all bounds. There are all these retreatants, one can say the ones we've most closely connected with, but how many? There's a huge number on YouTube. Number of subscribers is amazing, and as for the number of views, it's beyond belief. Well into the millions now. Unbelievable. Some of these comments now come from people that we actually have made contact with, and we know them personally, and it's a wonderful way of sharing. In a way, I've written all these books now, but I wouldn't say the books are redundant. They have their place, don't they? But these videos have certainly opened up a new way of communication, which is wonderful. Especially when it's a two-way process and we get feedback. We do, by the way, greatly value your comments. We both of us read them all. So they are noticed. We don't answer them all, but they're all read. I have thought of at least putting thank you on each of them, but it would get a bit repetitive, wouldn't it? You must just take it for granted, yes, that we read them all in with gratitude, appreciation. Well, I used to ask Phil, what do they come for? And maybe this woman who describes me as nothing puts her finger on it. What do they come for? I find it hard to believe, really, that somehow I don't quite know. I feel embarrassed to even just say it, really, that there's something that people find useful, find. Well, of course, it is heart to heart because it's instant love, and it's a wonderful meeting, really. I never prepare anything. I just sit there in front of them, and well, of course, we meditate together. I can always do that because I just meditate, and if people want to come and meditate with me, well, God bless them. The door's open. The more the merrier. But then we have various sessions where I'm with them, and we just talk a bit, and something seems to happen. Some magic seems to flow, and they go away. Well, I get uplifted, and we all end up as though we've known each other forever, and an indissoluble bond. Well, we go up on the hills, or we do something nice outside. Oh, there are lots of lovely things to do. But even when it was raining, we've got a few options. We can do something in the church. Well, my old farm's just down the road there, so we go and look at my old farm. Of course, now half of it's a car park. It's a bit of a lesson in mystic forbearance, isn't it? But you go a bit beyond that, and the lovely valley is still much as it always was, with sheep and a buzzard overhead, and it's lovely. So they have become really very important things, these retreats, not only for us, for Phil and me, but hopefully for the people that come. And from what they say, it's something very powerful seems to happen, something of deep significance that is difficult to put into words, really. But we're having them every month now, and details are on the website, and the more we have, the better we are getting at organising them, and we've got a string of various accommodations that we can draw on. So hopefully each one's getting better. And we love to have you, really, genuinely, deeply. It's a privilege for us, and I hope it is for you too. To meet, I know what it is, you see, we're meeting. You know, I keep talking, and in the videos, you must get sick of it, I keep on talking about this invisible oneness, this stillness, this presence. Of course, when we meet people face to face in these retreats, or when people just come and see me one to one, that's really what happens. We meet in that oneness, that spiritual oneness that transcends the separate you and me, and find what all of us in our hearts long for is that perfect unity, the ultimate completion that we all long for. It's not just theory, it's not just words, it's a realizable fact, and it can be found in experience. And even if we just touch the hem of this blessed state, it's something that you never forget. Yeah, now, my dears, feet on the floor. Feet on the floor. Total, effortless love. Unfailing and forever.